Okay, as you heard, this year's theme for World Usability Day is the usability of financial systems. And for our keynote, we're very pleased to have Mike Ehrenberg with us from Microsoft. Mike's going to talk about the importance of design, both broadly and focused on financial applications. He'll share key points about how the Microsoft Business Solutions and Dynamics teams think about design. But first, I want to give you a little background about Mike. He is a Microsoft Technical Fellow and Chief Technology Officer for Microsoft Business Solutions. He leads on long-term product strategy and on driving relationships between Microsoft Dynamics and the technology teams across Microsoft. And in one of his many accomplishments that he had before coming to Microsoft, he actually led the development of one of the first commercial banking systems for Windows. It's pretty cool. And I asked Mike to share an experience about personal finance, as I asked all of our presenters to do that today. And he shared how he learned very early in his career how anxious people can get about financial applications. So a couple quick lessons from Mike. He said, number one, when you're in line for an ATM that isn't working, never admit that you designed the software. And number two, and perhaps more importantly, never have an ATM fail for a farmer with a large horse that has just eaten. Now, I have to tell you, I don't have time to tell that whole story right now, but suffice it to say, it's a very smelly situation when that ATM does not work, so it's very important to keep those systems up and running. It's a true story. It's amazing. So with that, please welcome Mike Ehrenberg.
Thanks a lot, Dean. I've worked on financial applications for over 30 years, and we're at a time now where change in technology, move to the cloud, explosion of new devices, new experiences like Windows 8 are forcing us to, or giving us the opportunity really, to reimagine everything that we do about those applications. And I think it's sort of a once-in-a-generation opportunity to completely rethink what we do, and it's an important time for us to really recognize the value and the impact of design on that process. As we look at this, we're really focused on the opportunity to build financial applications that delight. The picture there is supposed to represent the contrast, kind of a backward view of where many of the financial applications in business come from. It's from a video that we run that to kind of talk about the contrast to what we're doing now. Financial applications are not a small niche category. We all use them every day. Every time you interact with an ATM, please don't bring farm animals. That did happen. Every time you use an online bill payment system, every time you interact with your bank or your brokerage by a website, you're dealing with a financial application. For business users, for many of them, it's how they spend their entire day. And it's absolutely essential to understand the impact that design can have and where we really could be if we produce financial applications that delight. And that matters both in the consumer side and in the business side. On the business side, there's, design and usability really affect how people feel about using the software. Functionality talks about what they can get done. Design and usability affect how they feel about what they're doing. Do they come to their desk in the morning and say, great, let's get to work? Or do they come and say, oh no, here I go again? All right? And that really is about the feeling they get from the software. Design drives that, usability drives that. And there's plenty of psychological research that says it's not just an emotional thing, that if they're happy, they're more productive. And we're really driving more value from their work and from the system. On the consumer side, think about it. How often do you interact with your bank or your brokerage in person versus using technology today? I know where that number is for me in terms of whether my connection with them is through the ATM, through the website, or how few times I really actually go into the branch. And so the technology has really become the bank's face or the brokerage institution's face. I remember when I was working on ATMs, the banks all thought that for labor cost reasons, they really wanted to get rid of all their tellers and strictly have machines. Machines take less lunch breaks. They don't want to join unions. They don't have as much turnover. There are some cleaning issues, but they really felt that they could drive cost by going completely to a technology-driven interface. And what they quickly found is in those days, and we don't need to talk about how long ago that was, but in those days, those experiences didn't give them an opportunity to sell to their customers. So it didn't give them an opportunity to offer them a new account, didn't give them the opportunity to do anything except the transaction part. And they kind of slowed down. But if you look today, all of the large financial institutions are investing incredibly heavily in technology. It is their principal touch point with their customers and their prospective customers. And so the quality of that experience and the feeling that the customer or prospective customer gets when they interact with a financial institution electronically really is that is their first contact. That's what determines kind of what how much and how deep of a relationship they're going to have. So it's incredibly important. One of the things in the introduction was talked about are some challenges, and I think the challenge that I would put out is we really have to take a much broader view of design and of usability. Too often that gets positioned as kind of here's what we want the UI to look like. Please help with the layout. Please help with the design of a form. And that's important. It's critical, but it's only a small piece of the puzzle. And particularly with financial applications, I think there's a number of dimensions that really represent the broader definition of usability and design. The first is about performance. And in some cases, that's about responsiveness. Things just need to be quick. One of the things, more than the sort of obvious quicker is better than slower, is consistency is incredibly important with these applications. If something always takes 2 seconds, people can deal with that. If it sometimes takes a half a second and sometimes takes 10, it wasn't worth getting it down to the half second. And so consistency has an enormous effect in performance, has an enormous effect on how people react to the software. The other thing that I think increasingly is incredibly important to think about is the effect of network. And as we talk about moving all of our solutions to the cloud, that is an enormous impact on how people feel about the software that they're using. From a technical point of view, I've had more conversations in the last 6 months that involve the phrase the speed of light, because we're talking about the latency of how long messages can take to get across a network than I've had in 30 years. So the cloud has really brought this issue, which has always been big, right to the forefront. And too often we look at our solutions in our lab where we've got great equipment and high-speed networks and everything looks great. And then you put it out in the wild and you wonder why you're getting completely different reactions from users. We're dealing right now with a situation where our users in Australia and New Zealand are served by a particularly bad connection between there and our Microsoft data center. And we were trying to understand why we were getting entirely different reactions to the software in one geography than we were in another. One of the things that I frequently like to do with the things that we build, and actually like is probably a little bit off, but one of the things I frequently make myself do is I try them over the Wi-Fi from Alaska Airlines. And if there's going to be an issue that you're going to figure out about how your software might behave in different environments, it'll show there. That's not a recommendation or an authorization for everybody to go run up a bunch of air travel bills, but the suggestion to sort of really pay attention to that behavior is incredibly important. Another thing with financial applications, and it came up also in the introduction, that's incredibly important is trust. And if the users lose trust in the application, you may not be able to get it back. And trust starts, and one of the things you'll see is a pattern across many financial applications, particularly in the consumer space, is there's always that last confirmation. Okay, you've gone through all these things, hit this button one more time, and now I'm really going to go do this. And in a world where we're constantly trying to get rid of clicks and get rid of screens, there's a reason that you see all of that. You really want the user to be sure that they know this is the action that's going to happen. When I first started working on ATM systems, one of the patterns that we saw constantly occurring was as soon as people finished their session, they would print out the balances for all their accounts. They did it without fail. And we made a change, and we said, look, what we're going to do is we're going to put the balance on the receipt no matter whether you ask for it or not. And that allowed us to send it down with whatever the last transaction was, and saved us a tremendous amount of overhead on the system. But it was really, really clear that people weren't completely trusting of the systems at this point, and somehow they thought that receipt with the balance printed was going to make all the difference in the world. But they wanted to double check and see that had happened. And I think that's not an unusual expectation around financial applications. I can tell you that I had an experience about a week ago where I transferred some money from my bank's between accounts in my bank's online system, and I actually checked the balances in both places afterwards and made sure that it happened. And then I got up the next morning and was on there for another reason and noticed that transaction was gone, and there was absolutely no evidence that it occurred. So I called the human. That was one of my few human contacts with the bank. And they explained to me that wasn't possible. And I suggested probably they didn't want to have that conversation with me. And we went around in a circle for a little while, and then the conversation concluded with, is there anything else I can help you with today, which is one of my favorite exchanges. But that really kind of rocked me. And it wasn't a big deal. Nothing bad happened, and I did the transaction over again. But that really changed what I thought about the way their systems work, and it's something that will be in my head for a long time. And trust can be, things should never disappear. And if people suggest frequently one of the things we deal with is, you're deleting things or undoing things. Always approach that from the point of view of saying, here's the thing and here's the offsetting deletion. Create two things. Don't ever make things go away because it upsets that balance around trust. It can be as subtle as things around penny rounding errors. It's one of the horribly annoying problems in business applications for forever, is that you're dealing in the computer with floating point, but you're showing people decimal representations on the screen. You have 4 or 5 line items that you add up, and magically the total that you show doesn't match by a penny. It doesn't matter whether it's in the customer's favor or not. It doesn't help at all. It doesn't do good things. My understanding is we have in one of our subsidiaries, because of challenges with billing around this, we have people handwriting bills to customers in order to make sure that those numbers are correct. So it can be the smallest thing, but anything that rocks that trust has an enormous impact on people's perception and the way people react to the software. I think the last thing is we're at a huge inflection point in change in terms of the way we interact with computers, whether it's small screens on our phones, the very large screens like the Perceptive Pixels display that's shown on the slide, whether it's touch, whether it's interaction through voice with Connect. And each of these new ways to interact should really cause us to think about entirely different ways to look at the application. Things that worked on the text-based green screen when I started didn't work when you went to Windows. Things that work on Windows don't necessarily work when you shrink them down to the phone. And so we really need to look at each of these things differently and not just sort of try to apply the same patterns that we've done in the past. And I think the real challenge is own the entire experience. As a designer, find the partnerships with the right technical people to bring performance into the question. Find the right partnerships so that you're really thinking with the application people about the entire scenario that's trying to be addressed. And really become the champion for the overall experience with the customer. A few things to think about, and ones that we think about, is we're really very focused today on the fact that we're designing solutions for an entirely new generation of users. And one of the things it's obviously clear there's always a new generation coming into the workforce and a new generation of consumers. This one's different. They've always had devices. They've always been online. They've always understood that they can interact with whoever they want to at whatever time they want on the device that they're used to. They multitask. You know, whenever I look at my teenage kids, there's 5 or 6 windows open. One theoretically is homework. You know, and they seem to be doing okay. But that's never a design pattern that we would have embraced when I started working. Users were capable of one thing maybe at a time. And so really thinking about those patterns. It's interesting as you look at some of the things that are going on in the financial space. I think there's some things that are kind of halfway in between. And the one that I think about is the using your phone to capture checks. It's kind of an odd thing because most of the people in my generation are probably not capable of operating the phone in order to successfully capture the picture of the check. Most of the people in my kids' generation aren't writing checks anymore. And so the interface, instead of being able to email money or text money to other people that you need to pay, might be more fitting that the online check capture solves a problem for the bank, but may sort of be an in-between experience that's it's not clear how long it's going to last. I think one of the things to think about all the time is when should what we do online model what we see in the real world? And I think the screenshot that's there is from Quicken, one of the incredibly successful consumer user interfaces. And they basically put the check on the screen. They put your bill pay calendar on the screen. It worked beautifully. When they thought about the income tax problem, they did not take the approach of putting all the forms on the screen. And they've produced a completely different approach and one that works beautifully well. So thinking about when we model the real world and when we take different approaches is incredibly important. We think about this all the time. Some of the solutions we build for manufacturing areas, we're looking at taking some of the displays that they built by hand with magic markers and magnetic sliders and just making the screen look exactly like it. And in other cases, we look at entirely different approaches. I think the other one to think about is the heads-down user, the person that has to do large volumes of transactions. The screenshot here shows a sample of kind of our next generation of Microsoft Dynamics business solutions for the Windows 8 style UI. And we're spending a lot of time and focus on something incredibly important, which is how do we embed business intelligence in the solution? We've got these applications into which people pour transactions. The value of the solution is when you can turn all that data into insight for those users and help them do their job better. So the value is not really in the putting in, the value is in what we get from the data that's there. So we're spending enormous amounts of time on the new aspects of how we bring that BI right into somebody's experience and help them do what they need to do. But we got to remember that there's other people that use the system that have to create sales orders that have 1,000 line items, that have to create purchase orders that have that many line items. I actually brought a prop. Somebody on the way in said, "Nice laptop." I did at least have my Surface with me, so I had some recovery. But this is the first system that I worked on commercially, and this was a bank terminal for every teller at Bank of America. And it was a little green screen, I think maybe 12 lines, something like that. And one of the first lessons that I learned about sort of mistaken usability, the generation of product that came after that had a beautiful menu-driven interface that let people find the transactions they needed to do, and was very easy for new users to learn. But we discovered something. The way the bank had worked before, their tellers knew that to cash a check, the transaction code was 10, and a savings deposit was 2. And it's weird that I haven't worked on that since the 70s, but I still remember those numbers. And what that meant was that the tellers had their entire experience, they looked directly at the customer in the eye, and they had their fingers only on the numeric pad. And they typed the transaction code, the account number, the amount, and hit enter. And they were incredibly fast, and the experience that they had with the customer was a direct connection. Then we gave them this beautiful application with prompts and menus and help, and they were sitting there staring at the screen, and they had to use both hands. And it was very, very clear that we'd solved the problem for how you train new users quickly, but we'd kind of blown it with high volume users. You see the same thing in the supermarket with a checkout person that can just type the code for produce and move on and still look at you. That's not the right experience for self-checkout. It is the right experience for the experienced user. And I think every time we've had a technology change, when we went from the green screen to Windows, we lost the high volume user. And we had to work to get better at that. And just about the time we got better at that, then we came up with a new experience, and we lost that again. So in each generation, that's been one of the biggest sort of places where we kind of don't get it right. And we're in the middle of it again. And I don't think Karthik's here, but I know he's paying attention to this, so I'm not going to worry about it. Really quickly, just the sort of the things that we focus on in Microsoft Business Solutions as we think about design is our designers are very much focused on trying to understand the process. What's the user trying to accomplish? They're not looking at a screen and saying, let me design that screen, but they're looking at the entire scenario. What's the user trying to accomplish? They put those they address the design of the process in one pass. The second thing is we do a lot of work observing in the wild. So we go out and we watch real users. We don't watch the executives that have been assigned to work on the project with us, but we go and watch the accounts payable clerk. We watch the accounts receivable clerk. We watch what they do inside and outside of the system. Some of the biggest learnings that we've had about what we can do better for people come from not watching how they use the system. That's important. But watching all the yellow sticky notes that they had pasted on the side of their screen. Watching when they went to a paper thing instead of looking something up online. And each of those represented an opportunity for us to do something better and bring that experience into the system and make them more productive. And really being intentional about making sure you see new users and how they learn things, as well as experienced users and how well they're able to do things at speed. In the new era where we're focused on cloud-based services, where we're trying to change our delivery cadence from we're going to release every 2.5 years to we want to release new functionality every 6 months. At some level, everybody becomes a new user all the time because the system is changing and new things are coming online. And we really need to get to a point that those users can just find it, see it, use it, and not have to worry about getting trained and not have to worry about what's changed. So really understanding both of those dimensions is incredibly important. And then from a technical point of view, we're really trying to build in the infrastructure so that we can experiment and that we can actually get data on what users are doing and where they're struggling and where they're productive so that we can make data-driven, informed decisions. So that's really a sort of quick look at kind of the way we think about things. I do want to emphasize this is a very unique time in the industry. I know for all of our products, we're looking at a level of reimagining of our user experience that we never would have considered before. We're driven to do it because of the technology change around moving to the cloud, around Windows 8, around embracing the phone. And so it's work we need to do, but it's also an opportunity to really change the experience. And I think that that's something you see across every piece of software, at least in our company and across the industry. So this really is, it's a tremendous opportunity, and I hope that we all take it. I guess I can take questions for a little bit.
Yeah,
Thank
super.
you very much.
We've got some time for questions, so you can go back to the microphones if you'd like to in the room to ask Mike a question. And I believe Alex has got a question from the Twittersphere.
All right. So the first one that we got here is, how do we balance getting rid of paper trails while consumers worry about data being deleted?
Well, I think it's just an issue of whether you have to print it or not. The trail of information needs to be viewable and viewable online, but doesn't necessarily have to go to paper. It's really kind of amazing. The paper does give a certain generation of users comfort. I remember when I was working on banking systems, one of the real challenges was the passbook and printing in the passbook, because you'd get somebody who hadn't been in, most of you don't even remember what a passbook is, but people would walk into the bank and they hadn't been in the bank for a couple of years, and 24 interest payments of 52 cents would have to post into their book, and you'd have to remember when to turn the page, and it was kind of a nightmare. It didn't really matter what was on that book or not on that book. The bank's records were much more important, but people took real comfort in the paper. I don't think that's the case anymore. I think people are happy if they can see the information online. So I think it's perfectly possible to get rid of the paper trail, just not the information trail.
All right, if we don't have another one in the room, we got one more here. It's a two-parter. Are there cultural differences in how people think of finances, and how do you understand customers around the world?
We think about cultural difference in our system in many ways. I don't think that we see real difference in terms of people's perception and reaction around financial applications. I think we find that the only way to be on top of how the local perceptions and local requirements affect what we do is actually to have people on the ground and to have native people on the ground. And so we have teams of people in every one of the countries that we operate in. And we don't have teams for every one of our disciplines out there, but we have people focused on understanding regulation, understanding requirement, understanding usage patterns, and they gather that and share that with all the rest of our teams.
Awesome. All right, if nobody else has any questions,
Thank you.
Please thank Mike Ehrenberg.